Welcome to Twisted Remedies. I'm your host, Justin Kucher, and this is a podcast about the benefits of jiu-jitsu and other non-traditional remedies in trauma recovery. My guest on today's episode is Austin Feldman. Austin is a black belt in jiu-jitsu and a Border Patrol agent. At Border Patrol, he is the head sector chaplain and a defensive tactics instructor. Austin also runs a BJJ school out of his garage, which we're going to talk about in this episode. And more importantly, he is probably one of the most resilient, selfless, and positive people that I have ever met. All of those reasons are why I wanted to get Austin on the podcast, to tell his story, hear about how jiu-jitsu has helped him overcome many things, and how he still uses it to promote good things and positivity in others. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Austin Feldman. All right, here we are back on Twisted Remedies podcast. My guest today is Austin Feldman. Austin and I met at yet another guest who I met at a BJJ Globetrotters camp. This was the USA camp in Maine in 23, and Austin owns, runs, operates, all of those terms I think apply, Guardian Tactics in Michigan. You're with Border Patrol, correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Head sector chaplain, defensive tactics instructor. You guys got cool mats that have Border Patrol logo on them. That's pretty slick. Yeah. And basically, we were at camp. Austin did a seminar on kind of the intersection of mental health and jiu-jitsu. I went to it. It was great. And I, at that time, just for point of reference for listeners, I had just hit a year of remission from lymphoma and was still like really rebuilding. I had a weird scan right before that. And Austin was like just a great training partner. There was, he's like, let's do what you can do at your pace. And it's just super cool. We'll get into a bunch of what I think about all of that as we go, but welcome. And thanks for coming on.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm wearing my Tap Cancer Out shirt
Very
and
nice.
hat.
Very nice.
We just had we just had the Tap Cancer tournament here in Michigan. A bunch of students came out. It was an awesome event. Raising money for research. And man, I was super stoked when you said you were doing a podcast. I couldn't think anybody better. And then when you said I could be on it, I was like, oh, it's going to be awesome now.
Yeah, well, so it's funny because when I talked to you at camp last year, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something. It turns out it ended up being this. So, this is what shook out. I think I'd like to jump right into, the seminar you put on. I went to this thinking this is just going to, this is like somebody, and I think you would put like a post on the group Facebook page about, hey, I'm going to do a seminar. And you had a little intro, but I didn't really know what it was, but I was interested. And then I got there and it was pretty profound. And so I thought it would be, if to the extent, what you're willing to share, if you can just kind of tell some of that story and take us there through some of that.
Yeah, so I'll kind of talk about my history. So first and foremost, I'm a pastor, so I'm really driven and passionate about testimony, sharing the story of what we went through. My upbringing, my childhood history was not good. And I'm not going to talk too much on my parents. They're no longer with us, and they're not here to defend themselves. And I'm not one for talking about people's shortcomings or struggles if they're not here to share their side of the story. But as a kid, I was physically and emotionally abused. Physical abuse is what actually refined the strength that I have to be kind to people, to understand that we don't need to, beat on each other in a physical manner to get our point across. We can do things with words and respect. Emotional abuse gave me strength and understanding and how people are battling demons and battling shortcomings. And sometimes somebody snaps at you and really it just comes down to they're feeling low on themselves, or they're just having things going on behind the scenes, and you just kind of need to give them some grace to open up about it. My parents were addicts with drugs, which gave me strength to not pursue drugs, to not allow substances to numb my pain. I've never tried anything recreationally.
Yep.
I'm very careful about pain medication because my mother was really addicted to pain meds and would actually do a lot of grifts with doctors and drag me along.
Yep.
At a really early age, she was like teaching me how to be kind of like a criminal. My dad was a heavy drinker, alcohol, and that made me never drink alcohol. For years, people always thought that I didn't do drugs or drink because of religious reasons, and I actually, I believed in God and I went to church, but I wasn't that type of person until many years later. I stayed away from those things because I was worried that if they overcame me, that I would become a monster and that I would hurt others. And I've always had a very empathetic background to myself, which is usually a byproduct of abuse. You learn at a very young age to watch people and their emotions because you don't know, hey, are they getting mad and they're going to yell at me? Or, hey, are they going to get mad and they get a wail on me?
Right.
I don't say this facetiously. I've almost lost my life a couple times, and that's something that just really changes your perspective. It gives you the strength to understand the value of life. I was homeless. I actually lived out of a little Ford Focus here in Michigan winter. And I actually tell people that was one of the, crazy to say, but one of the best times in my life, because though it was harrowing and difficult, I remember, and I actually tell this story to agents a lot, and it sounds cheesy, but I have this profound memory, and I'll use that word a lot, profound, these moments that really impacted my life, when I was looking out of the back of my car window, wrapped up in a blanket, freezing, and the moon was out, full and beautiful. And I remember just looking up, and I made this, like, for lack of a better word, an oath. I swore to God, who I knew was there listening to me, and I swore to everything that had come ahead, or everything that had come and everything that lied ahead, that I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that nobody felt alone or felt broken like I did. And that's just been my passion ever since. It hasn't been easy. I'm not no perfect person. I drop the ball a lot. But I'm really passionate to help others. So when it came to the Globetrotters camp and I saw that there was an opportunity to teach, I was like, I really want to share how martial arts has helped me, because there was a time when I was in an MMA. I did some amateur matches. I used martial arts to be cruel, and that was moments I'm ashamed of. And I found really quickly that was turning me into the person I didn't want to be. And ultimately, I changed my perspective on martial arts, and now I use it as a thing to build my confidence, so that I don't feel like I could, be overwhelmed by the world. And I use it to build the confidence of others.
Yeah, I mean, that oath is a pretty high bar, like, that you set for yourself. That's no small, if I see anyone suffering, I will, we'll talk about some superhero behavior coming up, but that's...
My counselors have talked to me about my superhero behavior. Sometimes it's not good.
Well, I just think about, like, that's a high threshold to put on yourself, and not a lot of people would do that, and that's commendable.
And realistically, it's the result of having seen so much darkness myself that I want to combat it with as much light as I can show. And I'm human, but Christ and God working through me has given me the opportunity to showcase what I believe, which is the world is good and there's good in it if you seek it and you look for it deep enough.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully you don't always have to look deep. Maybe sometimes it's right there, but it is there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned the MMA kind of background and how martial arts wasn't always, like, I guess, a good outlet, maybe, or it was a good outlet, but it manifested in a bad way. How did you come to train, and was it just jiu-jitsu, or was there other? There's obviously striking because you were doing MMA, so you weren't just trying to pull guard, I'm sure.
So I started off with a Power Rangers VHS. Tommy, the Green Ranger, put on a karate class that I was able to do on a VHS, and that was what started the journey. No, it was when I turned about 13, I got into boxing. Yep. I love the art of boxing. I was a big fan of the Rocky movies. I just thought it was just this, not just a beautiful sport and art in and of itself. But I wanted to be a boxer. So I had aspirations to be a striker. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a striker. I'm going to be the best striker ever. But I was a big boy. Like I was pretty husky, as they used to say in the 90s. Like you're big boned, kid. And I had a coach that actually, I tell the story all the time. He nicknamed me Rhino, and I thought he called me Rhino because I was so powerful, and it was really because I didn't know how to move my feet. And he was nice about it when he revealed that. But yeah, I did striking for a number of years, and then I actually got into a fun little sparring match with a guy I went to school with, and he was telling me about mixed martial arts. And he absolutely destroyed me. And he was like 145, and I was in like the 200s. I was pretty heavy for a kid. And I couldn't do anything to him. I got him to the ground because I had wrestling experience, and he just got up. And I remember just looking at him and going, what is this? So he actually kind of started mentoring me. I got plugged into an MMA school, which, hey, I have a lot of thankfulness for that time. I'm very appreciative of everything they showed me, but the culture of the school didn't fit me. And I tell people that you'll go to schools where the culture is, we're going to make you beasts. We're going to make you able to get submissions and win matches, and it's going to be awesome. And sometimes it just comes at an expense. There was one day they held a competitor, one of our guys that was training for a fight, and they had all of us come in and do body hardening. And all I did was I was hitting them in the gut, watching them crumble and thinking like, I don't know, this feels like I'm causing a hernia, but okay, I guess he's going to get stronger. And I just did it for a while, and I'd have bloody noses, and I'd be all messed up, and I could give as well as I got. I felt like I was doing pretty well. But in the end, I was like, I don't think this is for me. And it was actually right before I went into my work, I did a smoker, just a local event. I won it, but I almost broke my hand. And when I was at the academy, I had to kind of conceal it a little bit because if you were injured and you were out for more than 3 days, they retreaded you.
Right.
And I was like, I just got to fight through the pain. And it was that moment where I was like, I can't get injured to such a degree that my career ends. And that's one of the things when I get students, I'm really like compassionate about, because I was listening to your last episode with Jansen, right?
Jason, yep.
Yeah, Jason, sorry. Jansen.
That's all right.
Jason and even your coach, and how they were talking about like offering jujitsu and offering like firearms and offering opportunities, and people won't show up. And I totally understand. I totally agree with it. When I've scratched at the surface, a lot of times, and I don't mean this rudely to people, but it's fear.
Yep.
They're fearful. They're afraid of getting hurt. They're afraid of showing inadequacies and showing weaknesses. And that's why me as an instructor, I always tell people like, hey, look, I'm not super perfect. I have my own shortcomings. You're going to have some of yours. My job is to guide you through those. You might be older than me, but I might just have more experience. And with that experience, let me offer a perspective, and hopefully it takes you along the way. So I got into martial arts really young. I've been doing it for a long time. I try to touch everything. I've done judo, Muay Thai. I just got done. So today was awesome, actually. Glory to God. It was a great day. I woke up at like 4:30, jiu-jitsu at 10th Planet, went to work, ran a 4-hour jiu-jitsu seminar, came home, showered, ate, and then just got done doing Muay Thai sparring with one of my favorite students who's actually one of my good friends. I'm officiating his wedding this fall, and it's just been awesome. And he literally looked at me and said, I don't know how you do it. And I said, I don't know how I do it.
I was going to say the same thing, because your feed is constant. Like getting up at 4:30 is not a new thing for you. From what I have seen of your feed, it's just up early and I'm going here and you constantly train. So good for you. That's
super great. And I tell people, not everybody. So I am very blessed and very fortunate. And am I deserving of it? I don't think I'm deserving of anything. I think I'm responsible to earn it.
Yep.
And I tell people, if I go to a training or I get an opportunity to get something that somebody else doesn't, I will give it to you. I will give it for free. I will help you. I will show you, because that's what life should be about, in my opinion, is the community and the way we build each other up. So yeah, I train all this time, and then people come to me and be like, oh, I'm jealous. I wish I could do that. And I'm like, all you have to do is ask, give me your time, and I'll show you exactly what I know and what I've gotten. And that's how we all grow.
Yeah. I can speak to that firsthand, because like I said at the opening, at camp, I was very, like, I had not rebuilt physically, and I was still shaken the cobwebs off of some, all the the medical trauma that comes from cancer, and which I hadn't really counted on. I didn't realize, there's a mental health component. I was like, my body's beat up. I didn't even think of the mental health component, but I remember getting there,
right,
and it was so good to have somebody to be like, you know what, we're just going to do what you can do. And like, I held it together, and we were drilled. I know we drilled, a bunch of classes together and stuff. And it was, so I can say to people listening, like, that is 100% Austin. That's from what I saw and from what I see online all the time.
Well, and you were an absolute blessing to me. I tell people all the time, so Guardian Tactics, which is my school, I run it out of my house. I used to have a location in Plymouth, Michigan here. The realtor who was blessing us with that ended up selling it. I was super happy for him, and we came back to the garage. And I told everybody, like, because people look at me and be like, you train out of a garage? And I'm like, yeah, I train all the time. I do instructionals. I go to schools. I go to a 10th Planet. I learn different stuff. But I literally call it the perfect crime. I have 3 boys. I have a beautiful, wonderful wife who deserve as much of my time as anybody else. And being a giving person, I can tend to make myself busy with helping others. So by teaching out of my garage, I can step out, teach people, and then come in and eat and take care of my kids. Yep. And I tell people, just come to me. It's free. I'll train you. You can test my stuff. I'll go to schools and you can see me do it, so that you're not just, hey, maybe he knows what he's doing. And I'm like, but I'll give you what I got. And the benefit to me, because you might be like, oh, that's really awesome, you're doing it for free. No, the benefit is you come to me and you're a person that's doing this art with me and letting me further my abilities and grow. And it's just awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching, I thought that was your garage. And so I trained at a school nearby, but I matted my garage fully. And my cold plunge is out there. So like every Sunday I have an open mat, and it was refreshing to see somebody else with just no space for a car, just mats everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. My father-in-law did point out, he's like, when it snows in Michigan, the cars are better in the garage. And I was like, yeah, well, I didn't have a garage before, so we're just going to continue to not have a garage. And he was like, cool. And he comes out and he'll see me and he's like, oh, it's good stuff. No, I love it. And the thing is like you said, like, people come, they train with you, you get that time. Everybody benefits, everybody grows, and you go from there. And we actually went to a competition once, and I'm very proud of this, not prideful, but one of my students, like, ran through a guy in competition, did a really great job. And the student came to us and said, well, hey, what school do you train out of? And he just looked at him and he looked at me and he goes, I train out of his garage. And the guy said, no, seriously, where do you train? And like got mad. Yeah. And my student was like, no, I train out of his garage. And I told him, I said, hey, think like Gracie Garage. It's a thing. Yep. They're reputable. They're good. I said, we do kind of a similar fashion. And the kid was like, cool. And I could tell he was like, I got beat by somebody out of a garage. And I was like, no, it's not like that. We have mats. Right. We're not doing it on concrete.
Right. Yeah. We're super tough. We train on, concrete and oil stains.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Right. I was going to get into the, Guardian Tactics and all of the kind of what drives you for that selfless piece. And I think you touched on a bunch of that earlier, but I think just as a point of reference, the motto for Guardian Tactics is not for self alone, but for all. And like, if that doesn't sound like some kind of superhero, like we're taking the hill, it's, I find it inspirational, especially after having met you and knowing that is genuine and that is not at all, a facade or just, putting on appearances. That Guardian and like, I've read a bunch of stuff. You refer to like the group that you train with as a community, and it's very much you're embodying selflessness. And I think that is, if more people could figure out where that comes from, then I think we'd be in a far better place.
Yeah, and it actually got inspired not just through martial arts, but when I was a youth leader, and my wife and me talk about it all the time. It was one of the best times in my life. I had young men that would, visit us at the church. It'd be me and another couple leaders. We'd sit down and we just talk about life. Hey, what are you going through? What are you overcoming? And how can we help? And we, we'd always, encourage them through scripture. We would encourage them many different ways. But one of the things I was really big about was I called it the secret Samaritan. So my boys would always like open the door for, people when they came into church on a Sunday, or they would be the first ones to volunteer for stuff, which was awesome. And, they would be like, oh, I got told how great I am. I got told how awesome I am. And I'm like, yeah, but how cool would it be if somebody didn't tell you that? Right. And they were wondering who did that good thing. So I did a thing called like the Secret Samaritan Project, where I would just tell them, find somebody who needs help them, and don't get credit. And I still do it myself to this day, because I find that if I keep seeking the pats on the back, then I'm losing the integrity of what I'm trying to accomplish. And the students that I teach, I call them guardians. We've never really discussed whether they like that or not, but I told them, I'm like, martial arts to me is, it's meant to protect me. It's meant to give me confidence, but I'm in law enforcement, and it's meant to be used to protect others. Yep. It's meant to be strong for those who are weak, and it's meant to empower those who are weak to be strong. And the motto, not for self alone, but for all, is this understanding that, like, one of the main proponents of promoting under me, I tell people, I'm a nerd, I call it the Triforce. So, Zelda. Yep. So I'm like, you gotta have the wisdom. So you gotta have the technical know-how. You gotta have the power, which is your athletic prowess, and then you gotta have the time. You have to have been in for a certain amount of time. If I do you just on time alone, that's not good. Yep. You might not have been progressing. If I do you on knowledge alone, but you haven't had the time and you don't have the athletic prowess, so on and so forth. But I told them one of the other components is they have to coach. I'm like, you have to coach and teach and give back. And I'll tell them, like, hey, I'll work with you. I'll make sure it's solid, but we are going to help each other. So like one of my students, Joe, is working with one of my other students, Tom. Tom started jiu-jitsu pretty late in life, and he's doing a phenomenal job. And I hope Tom listens to this, because I tell him all the time, and I think sometimes he doesn't believe me. But I saw that Joe has a passion to help others and is really growing by teaching. Because imagine, you learn a technique and you teach it. It's perfect. You're helping somebody and you're getting better. Yep. But I tell him that. I'm like, I gave you this as something that was given to me, and now I want you to further it and go with it. So right now Joe is coaching Tom, getting him ready to move along to his blue belt, and Tom is learning like that act of service from Joe, and that's what builds us all up, and that's what I look for from my students.
That's awesome. That's I like that the teaching component. There's been a few times I've had to like cover, when Sergio, the guy that was on, when he is out, and it makes you sharper when you have to show somebody and make sure you're showing them the right way, for sure. So that is definitely that's a great way to do that. You wrote, I think this was just some random Facebook post that I saw, but I remember wanting to go back to it. But you wrote that you always push jiu-jitsu as a great mental health investment, and like explain like what do you mean by that, and can just talk about like the benefits of how jiu-jitsu can just clear the cobwebs and improve the mental health.
Yeah, so I tell people it's really interesting to be like, because jiu-jitsu in its purest sense is a self-defense art. It's meant to be a way to fight and defend yourself on the ground. And I can already hear some people being like, but what if there's another attacker? Yes, thank you. I should probably learn how to get back to my feet. Yeah. That's why I wrestle too. I don't mean to be facetious and make fun of people. I will always entertain a genuine question, and those are genuine questions. But like I do Muay Thai. I just did Muay Thai with one of my students. I think it's a great art. I think it's beautiful, and I love it. And I love jiu-jitsu. And I think training both of them is what benefits me overall, as opposed to being like, Muay Thai is way better than jiu-jitsu, or vice versa. Because that's where that cult kind of like, accusation comes from, where you're so rigid. But to kind of go into what you're saying in relation to just jiu-jitsu for your mental health, and this might, like I said, I apologize if I sound cheesy. I'm that kind of person. I was a theater major before I went into criminal justice.
I appreciate cheesy. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah,
because it's real. I appreciate real, and that's great. Go for it.
But yeah, and I tell people there's nothing more beautiful to me than to go to a place where people of different genders, different ethnicities, different economical backgrounds, different opportunities, different what have you, come together to navigate problems together. Now, don't get me wrong. You get your people who come in and they are just there to prove that they're awesome. And you know, to each their own. They'll get their treasure if that's what they're seeking. But when you genuinely come in and you work with another person and you can have completely different beliefs. I've had people who are anti-law enforcement who've looked me square in the eye and been like, I don't agree with what you did. And I'm like, hey, just to let you know, the media isn't on your side. I'm a very middle road person, and I tell them, like, I will sit here and I'll have a conversation with you, and I will agree to things and I will disagree with things. You can actually change my mind. Right. I tell people I am willing to do that. But anyways, I could sit with people who could look at me and be like, I don't like you because of X, Y, or Z. And yet we would start, going through these motions and these techniques, and we would navigate these problems, and really quickly we would see each other at the core root of what we are, which is just human and people. And I always attribute it to nothing will make you feel more alone in the world than when the people who are supposed to love you most abuse you. Yep. So I have this memory of being a kid, and I had gotten particularly laid into one time, and I went outside and I was actually bleeding and one of my eyes was swollen shut, and I remember being angry, just so angry and frustrated, but feeling so incredibly absolute alone. And I looked up, and I tell people, I'm not trying to proselytize. I believe in God, you might not. And you might be angry at what you believe God represents or what the Bible represents, and that's all fine. But you're not alone. For me, it was God. For others, it's the fact that there are people in the world who do care, right, who want to see you do better. And because I've seen that reflected by something bigger and better than myself, I try to exemplify that for others. So jiu-jitsu to me, when I come in and I'm working with somebody, that's me telling them, like, you matter. And I want you to grow, and I want you to get stronger, because I don't want somebody to take advantage of you like I was taken advantage of. I don't want somebody to make you feel small like somebody made me feel small, and vice versa. And I know on your last episode, you guys got talking a little bit about like genders and when women train, and like how I've had women come to me and just be so incredibly broken. I do women's self-defense seminars quite a bit when I can. I call it stay in the fight. It's a motto we have in law enforcement. You might have encountered it if you've ever been doing a scenario and your instructor's just yelling, stay in the fight. They don't just mean physically, they mean mentally. Yep. Stay in the fight. And I've had women come to me and be like, oh yeah, a guy jumped out of a car, grabbed me by my hair, threw me in a ditch, laughed with his friends, and drove off. And I'm like, I'm not a woman, and I've never had that specific thing happen to me, but I've felt weak before, and I felt made little, and I'll look at them and be like, all right, let's make sure that doesn't happen again. And we'll start with awareness. We're going to pay attention to our surroundings, because that's going to be our first tool. And anyways, I don't want to get too long-winded on it, but jiu-jitsu, it has so many facets of building your mind, and just navigating those problems with somebody else and having that camaraderie is huge, because we have so many modern conveniences that are detaching us from actually interacting with people, that it's just not good. It's not good for our mental health. It's not good for our mental well-being. And that's why people like CrossFit. That's why people like going to boxing or going to jiu-jitsu or going to these communal activities, because they do long to be connected to somebody in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you said that you listened, I'm still in this weird moment of like, people are listening to the podcast. It's I got to get used to that.
Dude, it's really good.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, literally, I woke up this morning. Yeah, I was driving and I was listening to the episode, and I had messaged you offline, and there were so many moments where I was just like, I agree with that. Oh, I've ran into that. Oh, I see that. I identify with that. And even that alone, just being like, hey, I'm not alone.
Right.
And it can feel that way when you're in the car and you're driving to work and you're just kind of going through the things of the day. You can start to feel like, wow, I've got a lot of hills to climb and I don't know how I'm going to do it. And then if you just take a breath and you step aside, it can be like, oh, well, you know what? I'm not like today, I was like, oh, I got to do that jujitsu seminar. And I was like, oh, no, I don't have to do it by myself. My buddy Jake, who's one of my best friends, I'm like, oh, he's doing it with me. I know he's got my back right now. And that feeling of like, I got people who are here for me as much as I'm there for them is just awesome.
I think I have to make myself do that too, where I have to remind myself there are people, like I don't have to do everything myself. Whatever it is I'm doing, like there are other people, in your corner. And if you don't have them, they're there. Just find them and talk to them and trust them. But it's, I think that is a huge piece of it is, knowing when you need to ask for help and knowing when, realizing you can't do something on your own, I think is a huge piece of that. So that makes a bunch of sense.
Absolutely.
So I think the first time I met you actually on the mat at camp was after the seminar, and you were wearing like a Superman rash guard, and it quickly became obvious that not only are you're very into, superheroes and all of that, but Superman is your guy. So I'm curious, what about the son of Jor-El do you find to be so, what do you relate to as far as Superman?
Yeah. Well, your listeners can't see it, but I have a Superman tattoo on my arm, and then I have Kryptonian on my forearm, which is my 3 boys' names. My first son's name is Kent, obviously for various reasons. And no, I actually like when people ask me this question because if you sort of look at it from a distance, you're like, wow, Superman, that guy's a nerd. And I am. I'm a huge nerd. I'm studying Japanese right now, and the other day a bunch of agents came in, and I was on the bike exercising, watching anime, and I looked at him and I said, Judge, I don't care. It's making me better at Japanese, and realistically, I just really like the show. But so when I was growing up, I just felt drawn to Superman. I felt drawn to the idea of somebody who had such immense power, but choosing to use it correctly. And once again, there were times where I'd look up in the sky, and as a kid being young and not knowing better, I would hope and pray that Superman would fly in. Like he would show up and he would tell me, hey, I've seen your plights. I've seen your struggles. I'm going to help you out. As much as like God gave me peace, like Superman gave me peace. Reading the stories, watching the movies, watching the shows would just give me peace. And I tell people, because everybody asks, Batman's sweet. I love Batman. Batman's great. The Flash is awesome. Green Lantern's super cool. My second favorite superhero is Daredevil.
Wow.
Which is really, super drastic difference. But I tell people, like, Superman exemplified to me something that I was able to hold on to in the darkest of times. Because I talked about this story once before. When I was about 15 years old, one of my parents, was selling drugs out of our little trailer. And in the middle of the night, a man broke in, didn't really break in. We didn't lock the doors. He just busted through the front door and started yelling at my mother, asking for money. And I was like I said, about 15, maybe 16 years old. And I was like, I'm a man. I'm going to defend my mom. And I went after him and started being like, get out of her face. And he grabbed me by the throat, slammed me to the ground, and actually grabbed my Adam's apple.
Wow.
And I remember he said he was going to kill me. And I was convinced, yep, I'm going to die. Like I had already, I was set on it. I was like, this is it. I've met the end. And there was this moment of like seeing somebody with that kind of power misusing it on a kid.
Right.
Was just frustrating and heartbreaking. And Superman, to kind of come back to it, is the opposite of that. It's somebody who could be cruel and chooses not to. It's somebody who could break others and chooses not to. And obviously he's a fictional character, but I just love what he represents. And whenever I'm in a bad mood or I'm feeling low, I pop on a Superman show. The other day, my son Kent and Eli, we sat down and watched My Adventures with Superman, and we just watched heroism, and we laughed and we enjoyed the show, and we went from there. So I tell people, Superman to me is just hope. It's, not to quote the movie where he's like, this means hope on my planet. Well, it's an S, dude. But no, it means hope. And he does mean hope to me. And I've always loved it. So whenever people ask me and they ask me why I named my son, I'm like, I named my son Kent, not because I wanted to, be cool and have a Superman kid name, have one of my kids have a Superman name. I named him Kent because I was absolutely afraid to have children because I was afraid I was going to be a reflection of my parents. Right. And I couldn't imagine bringing children into the world and bringing them into that kind of cruelty. And when I met him, and the moment I saw him and I knew that I was his father, I have never loved anything more outside of my wife and my other boys ever. And it's the name he has. He's my hope. And Eli is named after Elias because my wife loves Disney. And I know some people have their feelings about Disney and this, but what Disney represents, we like the representation of the words. And then my son Isaiah, he's a little mischievous monster. He wants to fight already. He watches us train. It's scary. But he's named Isaiah after the book of Isaiah because the verse, "Here am I, send me," is my life verse, and it's what I stand by. When somebody says, "Who will go for us? Who shall we send?" I say, "Here am I, send me."
Yep. And there's that Austin selflessness back out there. It's contagious. So you mentioned earlier, we had talked on other episodes, and you mentioned about getting law enforcement on the mat, and you mentioned fear, and I'm wondering if you have a solution or a thought on how we fix that, how we overcome that, because obviously it is a huge, aside from all of the benefits of the mental health benefits, the physical benefits, just being able to control the situation with it is super important for people on the job. But how do we get people on the mat?
So what's really big for me is, and I'll talk about being a less lethal instructor. So as you get to know me, I don't like to use the term because it makes you sound like I'm trying to be cool, but there's people who are called polymaths, people who are really passionate about learning multiple skills. So like any skill I can learn, I take. So I'm a chaplain, so I take counseling classes. I have counseling certificates. I'm an EMT. I'm trying to become a paramedic soon. I'm a firearms instructor. I'm a less lethal instructor, which means like firearms, I teach handguns to long arms. With LLI, I teach ground tactics to boxing to using other tools that are less lethal. I'm a MRT member, which is like sort of like we help like our version of a SWAT team with doing perimeters and stuff. Anyways, I'm really passionate to stay busy, but I'm really passionate to have multiple skills. And what it comes down to is when people come to me, whatever hat I'm wearing, whatever facet I'm in, I always try to find the middle ground. I tell people, to me, there's no absolutes in life. And I'm not going to get into, anything specific, but there are people who are like, it has to be this way. If it's not this way, it's going to be the worst. Or it has to be this way. If it's not this way, it's going to be the worst. And I'm like, sometimes it's really in the middle. The only absolute to me is God. And anything outside of that is pretty fallible. It can fall apart. So when officers or agents come to me, I always tell them, I go, what can you give me? Like, can you give me, like, I won't accept 0. I'll be tough on them for that. I'll say, hey, 0 is not acceptable. But can you give me 5%? Can you give me 10? Can you give me 5 minutes? Can you give me 10 minutes? Because a lot of people think when I come to them, they're like, you know what, man, I don't have an hour to go to class. Cool. A lot of people tell me this when, like, right now I'm studying Japanese, and because I'm going to go to Japan in about a year, and people are like, I can't believe you're doing something else. And I'm like, look, I have pockets of time. So when I have 5 minutes, I do a little lesson. I have a Busu app, and I listen to a Pimsleur audio recording in my car on the way to work. And I tell them, I'm like, I have pockets of time, and I can use them. And if I use them appropriately, I can get better. So my thing is I go to people, and I go, what can you give me? And they'll be like, okay, I can give you 10 minutes. Cool. And then I go into, I use a 3-tier system. Some people agree with this, some people don't. I like it, but I call it cognitive, associative, and autonomic. Cognitive is an individual technique that you rep for rote memorization. All right, we're going to rep this technique, and we're going to go through it. It has some merits. It can also falter because you can get what's called dead training. If they'll give me that, cool. We're going to rep this sweep, this takedown, and now you've got it in your quiver, and that should help you. The next one is associative. Hey, you'll give me a little more time. I'm going to teach you what 10th Planet calls warm-ups, the Gracies call combat reflex drills, and what I call strings. I'm going to show you one move that goes into another move that goes into another move so that you start seeing a logical pattern. I always make clear to them, though, that a fight does not play that way. Right. That's why katas fell to the wayside with karate, because you can't choreograph a fight. Right. I train to defend a punch that's straight, and then all of a sudden they throw a hook, and I'm like, whoa, what's that? I've never seen it. So I'll be like, can you give me that? If I can get enough time with that, then I'll say, okay, now that you've built a base and you feel strong and you feel good, I still don't want you to necessarily spar. Can you do ecological training with me, which the Globetrotters have become really big about, and I love. So I'll say, we're going to play games. We're going to do task-based games where we're going to have constraints, and we're going to look for emergent behaviors. So I'm going to have you come in, I'm going to have you roll with me, and I'm going to give you a job. So your job might be to get up. Get up off the ground. I'm going to give you just enough resistance, but I'm not going to use my hands, and you're just going to get to your feet. So Rob Cole, one of my favorite instructors of the Globetrotters, ran a class. You can see it for free on YouTube. I'm plugging it. And that's the first drill, is where you just put your chest on the opponent, and they move, and they get to their feet. And if that's all I get, I tell people, if that's all you've got, if that's all you give me, it's better than zero. Yep. It's better than nothing, because my fear, and it actually happened in my job. My fear is that one day you're going to need those skills, and it's not going to be there, and we're going to see a videotape of it. Right. And it actually happened to an agent who actually used what we showed him and persevered. But I was like, had he not ever taken it serious, it would not have played out that way. And I wasn't sitting there patting myself on the back. I tell people all the time, I hope you never remember my name. I hope you never remember my name. What I hope you remember is how I made you feel and what I gave you. So if you're like, wow, I learned this escape, and you can't remember who it was, great, as long as it helped you along the way, because that's the goal. I tell it in self-defense. You don't know how many fights you avoid just by paying attention to your surroundings, and you don't know how many people you help by just simply being kind. So yeah, for me, it's just, I tell, agents and officers, just come to me. And then, and kind of to expand on that a little bit, I also say, if you can't do it in a setting of multiple people, as long as I have the time, I will do a private lesson for you. You don't have to pay me, because it's pretty expensive to get a black belt, and rightly so. They have a lot of knowledge. They've spent a lot of time. I don't want to devalue it, but I do it for free because the government pays me, which is paid for by taxpayers. So I feel it's fair to do it for free because it's a blessing that taxpayers pay me. Right. So I'll tell even officers or agents or civilians, just come to me, and if you can't do it with a group setting, I'll do some private lessons with you as long as I have the free time. And then the beauty is I get to drill, I get to show the techniques, I get to grow, and so do they.
Do you find that starting people off with that approach, with what you just described, do you find that once they get in there and it's not, just try to memorize all these techniques, and does that approach lead to them realizing that they like it and maybe overcoming some of that fear? Or
yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I do it. And I tell people flat out, I try to be a brutally honest person. I don't like, I was lied to a lot as a kid, so I don't like people when they lie to me. I don't like people, concealing stuff. So I'll tell people even like tricks that coaches will use to like get you to do stuff. Like I'll be like, hey, I said it this way because it got this response. And I just don't want anybody to ever feel like I'm being manipulative. So I'll tell them, I'll be like, look, I'm going to have you do this because I have a pretty good track record of seeing people stay and continue to train. So I'll tell them, I'll be like, my goal is to get you to buy in. I genuinely, though, even though I want you to buy in, and so I'll kind of take it into a different context. My bosses know this about me. I'm very, very fortunate and very, very honored that my higher ups will sit down with me and let me have honest conversations with them, especially as a chaplain. I'll be like, hey, here's the problems going on at your station. And sometimes I've been able to go to somebody and be like, you're the problem. And not rudely, I won't say it disrespectfully. I'll be like, hey, it's stemming from some actions you took. Can you share with me or whatever? And people will have honest conversations with me. And one of the things I've said to several people who have moved on, they're they've gone on to do greater and bigger things, is I always say, like, I don't have any aspirations to become a supervisor. And I go, I don't have anything against it. I think being a supervisor is awesome. My only fear is that if I become a supervisor, I can't go to management and also go to somebody who's technically my subordinate.
Right.
So I've decided to hinder myself in my career because I feel that it's worth it. But I also tell them, because I can't get something, because I see it in my job all the time, people who act a different way because they're looking for different aspirations and opportunities. I'll just tell them, because you don't have something to offer me outside of maybe my shift and my days off, that when I shoot straight with you, I'm genuine. Right. Because if I had something in it for me, you could kind of question where I'm coming from. So it's the same with jiu-jitsu. As I tell people, like, I want you to join, but it's not because I get some kind of punch card on my black belt card and they're like, hey, you got us another one, dude. It's the same thing with Christianity. I don't tell people why I believe what I believe. And my job is to exemplify and reflect what I believe. And then if people become curious about it, they can come and talk to me, because that's how relationships should work, where they go, hey, why are you this way? And then I offer it, not me just going, you should be this way because. So jiu-jitsu is like that with me, is like, I just show it. I let people see me training. I come in, I wear my swag sometimes when I'm in plain clothes. I talk about how awesome it is. And then when they do open the door and they're interested to go into it, I tell them, like, hey, from the most honest place I'm coming from, I want you to have this, because once upon a time, not just once upon a time, many times in my life, I have had my back against the wall and I've had to defend myself. And if I hadn't had martial arts, maybe I would have gotten out of those situations, but maybe I wouldn't have. Okay. And my fear is, I learned this in a Krav Maga training. When an assailant comes and attacks me or attacks somebody, they're literally telling me, don't worry about your family. Somebody else will take care of them. Don't worry about your wife. She'll remarry. Don't worry about your husband. He'll remarry. Don't worry about your kids. Somebody else will love them. You're dead today. And your response has to be, like heck, I'm not letting it happen. I'm stepping up and I'm fighting back. And not only do I believe that for myself, I have to have that mentality if somebody tries to assault me. I want others to have that mentality, and I want them to have the tools to actually have the confidence to stand by that.
Yeah, makes sense. So this is turned into something I ask everybody that comes on. You know, it's a handful so far, but this is like kind of one of my go-to questions is, this is called Twisted Remedies, and it's about, you know, it's me exploring a lot of things, but part of it is, you know, why is jiu-jitsu so profound? To steal your word from earlier, for me, it's very profound in my trauma recovery and all of that. But you know, I started doing cold plunges a little over a year ago. Love those. Those are helpful. So I'm genuinely kind of seeking what else other people are using to heal, grow, strengthen themselves, whatever. Not that you have any more time in your day based on everything we've heard. Right. But what are your twisted remedies, that if there's some that we haven't talked about?
No, it's a great question. So for me, I like the word Kaizen. That was the name of my jiu-jitsu school that my coach's name was Ryan Fiorenzi. He's one of my best friends. He changed my life. He was such a caring, giving person. I was driven to just help him as much as I could. We developed a great friendship. He promoted me. He's retired now. He lives in Florida, and I'm thankful. I miss him all the time. I wish the school was still around, but I'm so thankful for the time I had with him. And Kaizen is a Japanese word, and it's derived from the understanding of and I'm paraphrasing it, but like progress every day, little progress every day. So a day to me is a day where I feel like I got a little bit of time on everything. So I wake up, and I love Stoic philosophy. Stoic philosophy is not the art of not caring. It's the art of caring about what you control. And when I wake up, I resign myself to what I call owning the morning. So when I wake up in the morning, the most important stuff to me gets done. So this is my encouragement to anybody that's listening. When you wake up and you grab your phone, don't go on social media. You can go on social media, because some people will be like, never go on social media. If it's something you can do in moderation and enjoy, then good, because you're an adult and you can control yourself. But what you should do is you should go to something of wisdom. So for me, it can be scripture. For me, it can be a quote. For me, it can be, you name it. So today was actually my life verse. Here am I, send me. I read it. I thought on it. So while I was brushing my teeth, I wear contacts, I weigh myself every day, and I was getting ready to go to 10th Planet. All I did was just in silence think about what that means. What does it mean to be here and wanting to be sent to something? What does it mean to go into the fray? Am I willing to lay my life down at any moment? Having 3 kids and having a wife, big questions, big concepts. It doesn't have to be like that every morning, but I just started having this like internal dialogue with myself and moving forward. And then another big thing for me, just with the counseling experience I have, is you really want to pay attention to your emotions. You want to be looking at them, analyzing them, and understanding where they're coming from. So we just recently did a suicide prevention training. I ran like some 60 people through it over the course of 3 days. It was a lot of heavy conversations. And the big thing I said to them is like, if you have negative thoughts, if you're thinking of harming yourself, if you're thinking of hurting yourself, you want to acknowledge that it's happening and you want to start having a conversation. Because what people do is they go, I thought about how I do it, but I'm okay. Right. I'm okay. It was just a moment. And they ignore it. And what happens is it's been proven that when you ignore those negative thoughts, they go into a dark place and they're like weeds that grow in darkness, and they'll start to take roots and they'll fester. But if you bring that negative thought to the forefront and you look at it, it actually has this marvelous thing that happens. It becomes depowered. You start to be like, that's not a good thought. That shouldn't exist. I need to do something about that. And then you start going on the road of getting help and the road of recovery. And I'll share the story. I battled with suicidal thoughts. I did get to a point in my life where I knew how I was going to do it. I knew when I was going to do it, and I was convinced there was a better world without me and me having to deal with it. And at the end of the suicide prevention, I showed a picture of my wife, who's my best friend, and I don't say that facetiously. I got done Muay Thai training. I came in and I got some meatballs and sweet and sour sauce in my belly because she cooked that for me because she loves me. And then my 3 boys, I showed each of my boys, I said, Kent is the goofiest kid I've ever met. Eli's the most compassionate kiss fish I've ever met. And Isaiah, he's going to be a cage fighter and he's got some spunk in him and I love it. And I told everybody, had I accepted that false belief that I was convinced was true, the world is better off without me being gone, then that picture wouldn't exist. It'd be like Back to the Future when he just kind of fades away. They wouldn't be there. And I said, I would have shut the door. And now look, that's not to diminish what people are going through. It's not to say that their struggles don't have merit. Just because somebody has it worse doesn't mean your pain doesn't matter. It matters completely. What I am saying is, if you can find just a little bit of faith, and if you can find somebody you can lean on, a counselor, a psychologist, you can start moving forward. So to answer your question more completely, I like to win the morning and I like to have those little victories. So I turned on my Japanese and I was saying like, Nihongo ga wakaremasu ka? Do you understand Japanese? And I was just speaking Japanese in the car. And then I went to 10th Planet and we did lockdown. And I was like, lockdown's my favorite move. And then I ran to work and then I did a seminar and we did Gracie combatives because we're trying to teach more law enforcement jujitsu. Yep. And that's the other thing for me is like, I love it all. I will go through everybody's system. Gordon Ryan's got great stuff. Gracie's got great stuff. And anyways, by the time I got to the afternoon, I had to take my kid to the doctor. He had to get a follow-up appointment. And I did a little more studying. And that was it. I won the morning. So if I didn't spar in the evening, no big deal. If I didn't do something else, no big deal. And now that doesn't work for everybody because your work, maybe you're too busy. So win the night or just win an hour, win 10 minutes, win a little time for yourself. And if you do that long enough and you do that over the course, because everybody's like, I need that hour, I need 2 hours. No, if you do 5 minutes every day over the course of time, that adds up to a lot. Right. And the thing is like we all deserve victories and we're all able to attain them if we just have that passion and that discipline to drive for it.
I mean, as I hear you describing the win the morning, it strikes me that it's there's a purpose, right? There's you're doing something intentional. It's not just like, getting on your phone and doing, but you're doing something intentionally and setting the tone. I mean, you're doing it in the morning, so it's setting the tone for the day. But I think that's a big piece of that is you are intentionally doing something and setting yourself on the path that you're choosing and not the path that, a Facebook post or some other thing that's going to set you, make you go sideways. You're picking what your intention is and you're going after it.
Yeah, and today was easy. I'm sure somebody's listening and going like, yeah, well, if I could wake up and go to jiu-jitsu for 8 hours, I'd have a good day too. Hey, I hear you. Whoever you are, I hear you. There's days I wake up and I know it's gonna be a slog. I'm like, okay, I got to go in, and I got to immediately grab my gear. I got to get out to the field. It's gonna be patrolling, looking for trouble. The other day we had this happen. We respond to everything. People don't quite know what the Border Patrol is. We're sort of like here in Michigan, we're really in everything. We will help local PDs. We will do it all. And there's times where we've responded to suicides. We've responded to domestics. We've helped out. And you'll see heavy things. You'll go through heavy things. And I'll tell myself, okay, my victory is to do the best I can, to help as much as I can, to be a light as much as I can. And at the end of the day, to find somebody to just maybe say a kind word to. I resigned to the 5 love languages. My wife's is quality time. Doesn't matter what we do. If we sit next to each other, she knows I love her. My time is very, her time and our time is the most valuable thing we have. And for being a busy person, I make sure like she gets priority. She wants me to do nothing. I do absolutely nothing. She comes first no matter what. And the big thing is like, my boy Kent, his is quality time too, and he kind of weaponizes it where he just pops up all of a sudden like you're showering. He's like, let's hang out, and I'm like, I'm in the shower, can you go do something for a minute? My boy Eli, his love language is touch, and that love language is actually really weak for me. Even though I like to do jujitsu, I do jujitsu and I can beat somebody up, but having come from my background, I struggle to be touched. But if he hugs me, it melts my heart. And then my boy Isaiah, he's just learning to babble, but he seems to want to babble a lot. So his might be words of affirmation, and that's mine, is words of affirmation. So a lot of victory for me each day to win a day is just to know I said something of kindness to somebody who really needed to hear it. Nobody's ever made fun of me to my face, but I've told the agents I'm okay if they're doing it behind my back. But I will always say to them, I love you. And I'll do it in the middle of muster when we're all like geared up and we're like looking like alphas and we're about to hit the day. But I always say it like this. I go, hey, I just want you all to know, don't forget, I love you. And I say, I know that's weird, especially if I'm younger than you, especially if it's, I said, but we spend so much time together. We have 10 to 12 hour shifts together over the course of 20 plus years. Right. That has to mean something. Right. And I tell them, I go, listen, most of you have said at least to one or somebody here today how stupid they are, how dumb they are. You're an idiot. You're a moron. And we're so comfortable with telling each other how dumb we are, and that's not weird. But we won't tell each other we're proud of each other. Right. We won't tell each other that we're doing good. So I tell them, if you haven't heard it today, hear it from me, and it is not fake. It is genuine. I love you because you're my brother and you're my sister and you're going through the things I'm going through and you're spending your time with me. Yep. And that means so much to me. It matters to me. Yes, you're getting a paycheck. And if you didn't have to be here, you probably wouldn't. But I do know how often people have stepped up for me and I've stepped up for them. So that's another kind of, in a long-winded way, a twisted remedy is just to remind people through my words as much as my actions that I am in fact for them and that we should be for each other. And if we do that, then when our career ends and we retire and we shut the door for the last time on our office and the door to the station, it'll have meant something. It'll have mattered. It doesn't matter about apprehensions. It doesn't matter about promotions. Yep. It just matters that we were there for a group of people for our time on this earth. And that's something I think has beauty and power to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those connections are the thing that lasts from all of the stuff. It's not, you're like, I've got a wall full of, nonsense that I was given over the year that I'll put this up in my office or whatever. But none of that
Right.
really, it looks cool, but it doesn't mean anything. The connections are what means something. And it's funny that, it's that being able to, have that dialogue and give each other some positive, there's such a, I figured this out toward the end of my career. Unfortunately, it didn't happen sooner, but the vulnerability piece that comes with that, and just being able to tell somebody like, "Hey, you know what? You did, that was a great job," and I love, like, that kind of thing is so foreign in in police work. It's it would, I think we would come so far if we could somehow figure out how to get everybody on board. They don't have to get weird with it, but just get on board with, treat each other like, I mean, you're basically, like you said, you're basically family. Treat each other like family. And I think that.
Well, I had somebody once tell me that Mr. Rogers is what was wrong with the world. And I was like, that's a weird statement. It's one of those statements like you hear in passing and you go, could you repeat that? And what their argument was, and I tell people, like, you can have your opinion, and your opinion might have some merit, but they were like, well, when Mr. Rogers used to make people face their emotions and put words to their emotions, that's what started the whole problem with the world, is people are too touchy-feely. I had somebody who was, and they didn't mean it rudely, they were in a leadership position, they were like, I don't know how to deal with emotions in the workplace. And I was like, I do. And I said, and that's when those things happen, just bring me along. Ask me if I can step in. I'll have a good conversation and we'll move forward. But anyways, back to the Mr. Rogers thing, which is still weird to me this day. I was like, no, what he was doing was he was watching children have these big emotions inside themselves and repress them. And guess what? What ends up happening is they do that when they become adults. Right. It doesn't go away. Everybody thinks you become an adult and you magically just lose all these childhood issues. Right. No, what they did was they repressed emotions. They didn't put words to them. And they either lived lives of quiet desperation or they ended up giving up. And what he did was he empowered people to have those conversations and to open that dialogue. And yes, when you do that, it gets messy. So realistically, when people go like it's too touchy-feely, and I don't, maybe this comes off disrespectful, but it is something I stand by. What it really means is, oh, you don't want to deal with the mess of a person being human. Right. And that's fine. I can give you credit. Maybe you're not equipped to it. Maybe you're not empathetic in that regard. Maybe you're more analytical. Maybe it's not your love language. Then find somebody who it is. And that's why I love being a chaplain, and I love working with the chaplains I have, is because we step in when those times come and we go, okay, we'll have a dialogue. We'll talk to them. We'll tell them, hey, that outburst was not appropriate. There might be some action that has to take place to rectify it. But at the same time, where did it come from? Right. Because I tell analytical people when they come to me, I go, listen, I don't mean this rudely, but you're about the numbers. Your numbers of personnel, your numbers on every day shift, your numbers, ... I go, if you want your numbers to stay consistent, then let them be taken care of and let their emotions be heard. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you let us do it. And if we do that long enough, then guess what? It's all going to balance out. So you can feel good about having your numbers, and I can feel good in the fact that the person who matters knows they matter and are taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I knew this was going to fly by. Just having talked to you before, I'm like, this is gonna be like a rocket ride, and it was. I can't thank you enough for coming on. This has been as cool as I thought it was going to be, and you've said all the stuff I thought you were going to say and hoped you were going to say, and I think my takeaway from this, or the thing I hope other people take away from this, is a drop of the selflessness that you exhibit. If everybody can just have a drop of that, I think we can really do some good. And so thank you again. It's been anything you want to plug. Do you want to plug the garage? Do you? I'm gonna put I'll put the Globetrotters video of Rob's up. I'll put it in the show notes so people can go find it and stuff. But anything else you want to throw out?
Now, my big thing is if you live in Michigan and you're in the Canton, kind of Detroit area, my name's Kal-El on Facebook. Kal-El for Superman, no surprise. It's a picture of me and my kids being goofy. You can just contact me. You're always welcome to come train. Like I said, if I got the free time to do it individually, we can absolutely do that. I do want to say this, and I mean this, brother, I am truly proud of you to take a cancer diagnosis and to go through the treatment process. And I know what you're talking about, the mental, just because like I said, I study medical and I understand like a lot of that quite a bit. My buddy actually worked for a cancer institute. He talks to me about it. To take that struggle and now you're making good out of it. You've let it push you to do a podcast about mental health and jiu-jitsu and encourage people. That's what life's about, because I guarantee, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when you were diagnosed, it was a gut punch, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was like, yeah, how am I going to move forward? How is this going to go? And I always tell people, when you're in that moment, don't focus on that moment. Like there's times you focus on the moment when you should really be in it and let it have its time, but you tell yourself, I can get to here. Now I just need to start moving. And I guarantee, had I talked to you when that day came and said, hey, you know what? In the future, you're going to be doing a podcast on mental health and jiu-jitsu. You would have looked at me and been like, who are you? I've never met you before. This is really awkward. But no, I just want to say, I am genuinely proud of you. I love you, as I said, as a brother. And if you haven't heard that today, hear it from me. And to touch on the drops thing you said, it's a quote that I really like that surprises people. It's from Gandhi. And the quote is, everything you do in this life won't matter. And when you hear that, you're like, wow, super pessimistic. But his next piece is the part that matters. He says, but it's important that you do it.
Yep.
And what he's getting at is, if you do something thinking it's just going to have this incredible impact, yeah, maybe you get lucky. There are some people who've changed the world in just a moment's notice. But for the most part, it's the little actions. It's the little actions over time, consistently, that makes the difference. Because if you look at the ocean, it's a giant, giant pool of water. But it's comprised of infinite drops of water. If I take all those drops of water, it's barren and it's dry and it's empty. So kindness is the same way. When I go to people and I tell them to be kind, they'll say, dude, you're naive. The world is cynical. You need to get with the times. Why are you helping people? They're just going to hurt you. Sure. Quite a few people I've helped out have gone on to do nothing for me and have, in fact, gone out of their way to hurt me. But I don't do it for them. Yep. I do it because my treasures are stored up in heaven. And I do it because one day it's for my boys. Right. If I keep putting drops of kindness in, then when I'm gone, the legacy, which I'm not worried about my legacy, but if I have to leave a legacy, it'll be a legacy of building the world as best I could so that they can persevere and they can rise above. Because I brought them in this world. Right. And that was a responsibility I had to undertake, that I was bringing them into a difficult world that continues to get more difficult. And if I'm going to do that, then I'll do everything in my power to make sure that they're equipped to have a good, happy, and healthy life.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you again, man. I'm figuring this out as I go, and I appreciate you, coming on and helping me navigate this and take it wherever it's headed. And I don't really know where that is, but thanks for being on the ride.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Twisted Remedies. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and write a review on whichever podcast platform you're listening on. Also, if you'd like to ask a question about something you've heard on an episode or didn't hear on an episode, or you'd like to recommend a topic or a guest, please go to twistedremedies.com and connect with me there. Most importantly, as always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.